Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On Air. And today I am joined by Tom Lavery, who's the CEO and founder of Jiminny. Tom, first and foremost, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, Owen. It's a pleasure to be on. So
Good
excited to
stuff.
chat today.
Thanks for joining us. So Tom and I are going to be talking about a bit about the Jiminny journey, but more so the learnings that have come through the first 5 years from startup to where Jiminny is today. What does it feel like to be a founder in that stage? What are some of the learnings? What are some of the things that Tom might do differently if he had his time again? And what are some of the things that he realizes in hindsight he absolutely got right? And we're just going to be exploring why so many startups don't get to that stage. There's a bit of data around that we'll share in a moment. Before we get into topic though, Tom, what we like to do is give all of our guests 2 minutes right at the beginning of the conversation. I'm sure there's plenty of people watching and listening who do know you, but for those who don't, can you give us 2 minutes? Who's Tom and who are Jiminny?
Yeah, no problem at all. So my background is sales. Historically, started off in sales. I was at SVP of sales for 10 years, a company called Royal Gateway. And then about five and a half years ago, I started Jiminny. And Jiminny is a conversation intelligence platform. For those of you who know what that is, but basically we're helping teams create a high performance culture. So we record, transcribe and analyze sales calls and meetings to help them use that data to become better. But it was all born out of my own experience of running sales teams and realizing how difficult it is to not get that visibility just using a normal CRM and trying to understand report at the board level, through management level, and actually, most importantly, help someone get better at the soft skills of selling. That ultimately gave us the idea for Jiminny, back in 2016 now.
Love that. I'm really keen. So there's a bit of data that you just shared with me, and I will caveat this by saying that we're not entirely sure on the source of it, so it might be a classic LinkedIn PowerPoint. But I think the narrative around it is an interesting one to discuss nonetheless, because we know it won't be a million miles out, which says that 96% of SaaS startups don't make it to £1 million. Only 4% do. 0.4% make it to 10 million. So quick maths, what's that? 1 in 250-ish. And then weirdly 0.0 something% make it to 50 million. And obviously you're on part of that journey. You're making it through. And I think what I'm keen to get out of your head today is the why. Why do we think you're on that journey and other successful SaaS companies are on that? What's the difference? What are the mistakes that people make that you see? And what mistakes did you make that we could go again? I'm keen just to move back to the beginning. 2016, I think it is, you started. I'm wondering if, because a lot of people in our audience will be thinking about founding a tech business. They'll have recently founded it. They'll be in the first couple of years. I wonder if you can just summarize, maybe you can think back. What did it feel like to take that leap? What was it that drove you to do it? And kind of, maybe just a bit of narrative around that fear right at the beginning of the unknown.
Yeah. So when you look back, like, ignorance is bliss. So even getting into my late 30s now, being in my early 30s at the time, just blind belief and just thinking that you've got this challenge that you can solve and you just know the answer. I think until you feel that inside of you, like, so often you hear, oh, I'm thinking of an idea, or I'm trying to find an idea. It's got to kind of hit you in the pit of your stomach that I can solve that problem. And I think, obviously there's a lot of things we're going to talk about today that make a business ultimately successful, but the market has to be right, timing has to be right, so things have to collide. We call it, in our onboarding training, we call it a collision of three things that happen to make a platform like Jiminny acceptable to the market at the time.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think I often talk to people who find it hard to reflect back on that first 12 months because they almost blocked it out of their memory, because hopefully they're in a very different place right now. It's very painful because, of course, everything falls to you. You don't have that mature leadership team around you. 100% in the people of the business, other than you, are new to the business within their first 12 months. There's a lot of things that you just can't recreate later down the line. And you're still learning and pivoting so much, sometimes daily, hourly, certainly if not weekly. And we almost, I don't know if you, I certainly do. I look back on that time and I kind of can't imagine it in some ways.
Yeah, it feels a distant memory, but I think someone said to me a little while back, startups generally don't fail, people give up. And I think there is some truth in that. You'll probably know this from your early days. There's times that you could have quit. There's times that you could have I remember we had some difficult time. I remember my wife, Shelley, turning around to me and saying, Tom, is it just time to call it a day? Is this really working? And it's just having that belief to go, no, we'll find a way, we'll change this. I won't pay myself for 6 months. We'll do something. Yeah. Ultimately, anyone tells you, when you listen to other podcasts, athletes, people who do well in life, it's about sacrifice. So you have to give stuff up at the same time. You have to realize that there's something you're going to leave behind to make this great or make it exceptional. So there's those things like, are people really willing to make the same sacrifices and actually not give up? And I think if I look back, there's individual little things, of course, along the journey, but if I look back at that, it's probably those two things, just the sacrifices that you made and the just blind determination not to give up.
Yeah, I like that people give up rather than it failing. I'm keen to, if you look back on that first 12 months, were there, and you may not be able to pluck these out, but any sort of definitive moments, either where you think, geez, I ran into something that was a massive challenge for us that we just hadn't foreseen, or that really was a curveball, or that was just really big, or things that were big wins that you kind of, those pinnacle moments that you can hang your hat on a bit?
Yeah, so obviously I have a technical co-founder, James, and we worked together in a previous company. So we had a strong relationship, even though we didn't always work directly together. So, if you don't have someone very commercial and someone very technical, that's another thing that makes it really, and you have a strong relationship because you go on this journey together, then it makes it harder if we're talking about SaaS and tech companies to succeed. If you've got too much of one and not enough of the other. Of course, there's always gaps in a founding team, but I felt like that. I think we put an enormous amount of pressure on ourselves from charging for every single customer from day one. At the time, we thought we had the beta version of Jiminny, but really it was alpha. I've said this before, but that just means that we really cared about every customer, especially the first sort of 10, and they really cared about it working because they'd gone and got an agreement signed and paid money, to have this idea. So that just made us obsessed with making it right, obsessed with shit, this is wrong, that's not working. I'm not allowed to swear, I don't know, sorry, but it was just like the first 10 customers, we were just constantly trying to work it out because it was like, we want to keep this ARR, we want to keep the revenue, we want to keep the customer happy, we want to make them, we don't want to let them down. So that was just ingrained in us from the very beginning. Whereas I think if you give it away to free for a lot of persons, they're not invested in the same way, and
It's an interesting learning. I talk to a lot of early stage founders, and they often talk about that, giving away for case studies, giving away for feedback, for client, for client engagement. So what you're saying is, are you glad you did it that way? You went in and you charged, you didn't run through. Are there any learnings you can peel out from that?
Yeah, I think making sure that you've got some sort of revenue or some sort of commitment is more, because everyone's more invested, sure. Yeah. And I think if I look back over that first sort of 6-7 months of going live, which you say it's hard to remember now, it's just a constant battle to get a product that works. Everyone knows it takes we probably did it quicker than most. We built a first version in 6 months, started charging, and then spent another 6 months getting it right, had a V1. So a lot of people, I hear it all the time, we're just taking some funding and we're going to spend another year getting the product right. And I'm thinking, well, just put it in someone's hands. And the things that I learned, you think you can do all this testing and all this QA, and you can look at it and look at it again. You give it to a user, and they do weird things with it, and they break things. And it's never the same in a controlled environment as it is in the wild, especially when your users are salespeople. I am, so they do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with your technology that's interesting. But yeah, that definitely makes a difference as well.
That conversational intelligence piece is obviously something that's fairly high up on people's agenda with growing sales orgs and that sort of stuff at the moment. What was it like in 2016 though? Because I'm guessing it wasn't as established. You didn't have as many competitors, and it was you kind of not. I don't know if it's category crazy, but you're certainly having conversations with people who probably more regularly be saying, "What's that?" versus "Yeah, I know." And
yeah, we just I think we had 10 or 12 new starters the other week, and I was doing some onboarding training. And as part of that, we talk about like why Jiminny was built and go on the journey. And you go back then, I would say on 80% of early demos or calls that I did, which is still recorded because they're all in Jiminny, like people would be like, so, I'm not sure, a team are going to like having everything recorded, and then I remember being on some horrendous implementations where you're kind of doing everything yourself, and like, the team turned around and was like, I don't want him listening to my calls. So like the SVP of sales believed in it, but maybe some of the team weren't educated enough to believe in it yet. So yeah, I think definitely there was some category creation there. Now I would say in the early adopters phase where SaaS and tech companies think this is normal, I'd say you probably need 5 things on top of your CRM, and this is one of them. Otherwise you can't do your job properly. So
yeah,
it all kind of links together. But yeah, that's that thing about realizing that this is going to be the future, and it is going to be something that everyone does every day, even if not everyone wants to do it right now.
Yeah, really interesting. I meant to ask earlier, and I'm just going to throw it into the conversation now. What stage are you at now? So launched in 2016. We talk about that, 4% getting to 1 million, 0.4 getting 10 million, and all that sort of stuff. Where are you at now here in 2022? What stage is Jiminny at, and what's the head count? What's the ARR you're running at approximately?
Yeah, so I don't know. Look, there's absolutely no right or wrong way to run or grow a business. You can go off your previous experience and everything like that. So, I grew up at Royal Gateway, and we were bootstrapped and kept things quite capital efficient. So that's what I knew. That's how I knew how to do it. So that's what we did with Jiminny. We took some small seed investment, and we wanted to, I think I thought product market fit was something different back in 2016, 2017, and that you learn that, and you probably learn it with your business in different ways. So like I think getting it to the point we are, where I think we're give or take like 60 people, going to grow to 100 people this year, well on our way to 10 mil. But there was bits in the beginning where everyone sees the stats, like it's maybe 2-3% of SaaS companies that absolutely go that quick. Most of them take 3 or 4 years to work it out and grind it out. And if you're I think if you follow Jason Lemkin on Twitter and you look at SaaStr and stuff, like most companies take 4 years to compound the revenue and get going, and to work out the motion and to do everything. So again, it's like, are you willing to hang in there and fight it out and work it out, and not kind of throw the towel in?
When you look at that data, so let's assume it's right for the sake of this conversation.
Yeah.
So as you rocket towards 10 million, and you obviously got lots of confidence in getting over that mark, you'll be in one of 250 people, or one of 250 businesses that are founded that get there. Amongst those other 249, only 10 of those will have got past the 1 million. Aside from that, you've got 239 or whatever it works out to. I'm rounding, might be terrible maths, but we're looking at a very small percentage, 4% that get past that 1 million. So it doesn't feel like there's a great, that once you get past 1, maybe 2, it feels like, not that it's easier, but you've got that snowball effect maybe that helps you run. You've validated product market fit should be there. You've kind of built a team by that point that you can somewhat rely on, that's helping you spread the load and not be the bottleneck in those early stages. Would you say, therefore, that it's a slightly easier task to go from a 1, 2 to 10, or is it just different?
This is different. Yeah. Like every stage, you think, oh, the next stage might be easier, or the next stage, it's just different. But it does, look, it was the same in my old business. My old boss used to say to me, when sales is going well, everything else becomes easier. And because you've always got options and you've always got money to spend. So it comes back to that thing. Like, I took the decision, I think I went to I did some like learning and development at the end. So like when I was living in the US and I was coming to the end of my time at Royal Gateway. I went to a few conferences, went to Dreamforce. I know I was going to start a business. I think I went to Inbound, HubSpot's event. I saw a talk by Gary Vee. Gary Vee is a bit Marmite for those people who know him, but like some of his content's good. He's changed a bit over the years, but nevertheless, he did an amazing talk. I think it was back at 2012 or 13 at HubSpot, and it was called Care Immensely or Die. And I thought, you know, me and James looked at it and go, well, what are the things we loved about Royal Gateway? What are all the things we want to do differently? Before we wrote our tech spec, we wrote our company values. And I think, you know, I knew from day one, I wanted one of our biggest USPs that would stand the test of time to be our service, our support, how we care about the customer. That is the most important thing, because no one can copy that, because that's a cultural thing. So we summarize the transcript and it's great. You can read a price negotiation in 90 seconds. We're the only provider in the market that does it. In 6 months' time, someone else will do it. Yeah, so you can't sell off that. It doesn't work like that. You know, it's like we very much work off of why and how we solve a problem and how we help customers absolutely maximize everything. But if you go back to that, we want to deliver fantastic service and support, then you have to have a really engaged team. So you've got to really care about your people. So it's all like a cyclical cycle, really, where it just all goes back to investing in your people, caring about your team. If they feel safe and protected, they'll do a great job. If they do a great job, you'll have happy customers. Therefore, you'll get more business. And it's just so it's all been interlinked for me from day one. And you know, we grew to the first sort of 3 million without a marketing team. Like, we had no one. We had one AE and one BDR, and we were bootstrapped and took some seed funding, which we really invested in making the product right. So that was all just through being very customer focused and support driven.
It's interesting that I think there's some really valuable points in there, and I'm going to pick out in a minute. I'm going to pick out your point around when sales is right, everything's easier. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But before I do that, just going back to this sort of 1 to 2 million up to 10 in that journey, and I think we both agree it's different. It doesn't necessarily get easier. The two things that stick out for me in that journey or being on that journey, one is that problems are shared versus in that early stage, it's kind of always your problem. And that links to what you're saying there, that actually if you've got good people and you build good people, then that problem, that the innovation, the problem solving, the firefighting, all those sorts of things are spread across more minds with diverse opinions, and that can really help. And I'm guessing by that point, there's a bit more margin for error as well. So, you know, you're running tight, you're bootstrapped in those early stages. There isn't a huge amount of margin for getting things massively wrong, but the bigger you get, there's a slightly bigger margin. I'm keen to just understand if there's anything else in there that you think, you know, that maybe differentiates. Okay, it may not be easier, but the difference between that 0 to 1 or 2 and 2 to 10.
I don't know, looking back at like talking about a founder starting a business, like I think it's very easy to get distracted. Like, I could have spent 70-80% of time on the product. You know, I've been very close to it, built it. But there's times where you just got to check yourself and go, what is my domain experience and what's going to be the most valuable asset to the business?
Yeah.
And I think but you see this in any person, in any job, people get sucked into what they want to do, what they need to do. And that's one of the biggest things. So I think there's many periods in time where, just from my business experience, you know, well, I want to do that, and that's a nicer thing to do, but actually what's going to get the result? You know, this is the kind of rule. So I think, if I look back at many different points in time, it's just sometimes you may not want to do that, or it might be the harder thing to do, but you just got to make sure that you're doing what moves the needle. So again, that's goes back to self-discipline and you know, making sure that you focus in the right areas, you know.
So on that leads me perfectly into my next question around focus. So I'm guessing at different stages of the business, you've had particular focus on different parts. I'm going to pull some bits out that you've talked about already. One is, which is obviously focusing on sales. So, you know, there's always that debate: do I invest in product? Do I invest in revenue? Building up the sales org and demand gen and marketing and those sorts of things. And then I think there's the general bit that you've talked about people, getting the people element right. And I think, you know, a lot of the big voices in business leadership would talk about people first. keen to understand are there stages of the business where you've had to focus more on one of those or two of those things? Was it product first, was it sales first, or have you been fairly level throughout the journey?
Well, there's an interesting angle there, which we did. So of course, in the early days, I think everyone invests more in engineering. You naturally do. But it's kind of like you have to get the product to a place where the founder tends to be, it doesn't matter even if they're not a salesperson, they tend to be great at selling it in the early days, right? But you need to get to the point where someone else can sell it without you quite often, and be able to do that. And I think that's part of it. But I think we've always been quite balanced. I think the thing that we've done differently is like we've probably invested 5 times the amount in CS, customer success, client success, sorry, we call it internally, than we have in sales, because I think already like 60%, give or take, of our revenue each month comes from our existing install base. And that is something that, is one, because we want to give a different level of service support, so customers they do need to get in enterprise SaaS, so they do need hand-holding to do something they've never done before, so that's all part of the journey. But I think the difference is we invest way more in client success than probably your average company does. I've seen other companies do it that way as well, but it's much rarer in my opinion. The natural thing is to pump into sales, not the other way around. But I think our client success team will always be much bigger than our sales team for that reason.
That's really interesting. I think that's a learning to take away. And what's been your philosophy with people? So I think we've it's come out already a couple of times in this conversation. Clearly, getting early stage hires right is critical. Hiring the right leaders around you, people reporting into you, whether that's departmental leads, whether that's senior leadership team, commercial roles. What's been your approach to doing that and philosophy to getting people right within the business?
Two things. So definitely in this later stage, hire people that are better than me at what I do. Like, that's something I'm, cognizant of, that, even at times I thought, the budget says a head of, but do we just need to flip it here and go for a VP, because the head of is it's nothing about that person. They're not going to be as talented and not be able to drive it or have as much experience. So I think that building a right team, and the team evolves and has different stages, for sure. So that's one thing. But when it comes to people, I think one of the biggest things I learned at Raw Gateway is just having real open communications and being really transparent. Like even now, when people join our business, or like I interview people, I'm doing that in the later stages. Like, we'll have the numbers for April, we'll show the flash numbers. People know what's going on, they feel safe. If we sign terms on an investment, we tell them what's going on in the process. They know everything we can as quickly as we can. And just having, one of our company values is be open, but just generally employees know what's going on. They're not silly. So if it's very hard to hide most things. I think just being open and transparent, but doing it properly and living by that value, then creates an environment where everyone feels safe and trusted, and then can do their best work.
Yeah, love that. Let's try and get some of the mistakes that you made, because you're not perfect.
Okay.
None of us are. I'm keen to understand, over the last 5-6 years, what are some of the mistakes that you carry with you? I know I know some of mine that I know, I should have done that sooner. That was the wrong hire, whatever it might be. Have you got some that stand out for you?
Oh, well, our first version of Jiminny, like I've talked about this before previously, I'm quite open about it. Like, we built our own telephony and it didn't work. Like, it wasn't powerful enough. Like the core platform and the idea, and there's loads of, everything's been the same, but we built a video conference when Zoom blew up. I mean, how can you compete? Looking back, it's a massive mistake. So, we pivoted to an integrations model. But then there's part of the story, part of the journey. So you look back and say, well, we could have grown quicker in the early days if we'd sorted that out first. But it kind of just is what it is. You can't I try not to live with regrets.
No.
Because everything happens for a reason, and there's loads of great parts of the platform that still exist and that were born out of that journey. So Jiminny wouldn't be Jiminny without it. But yeah, like that was a big mistake for sure. Even at times, I think I should have taken slightly, when I took some investment, maybe a small amount of money, work some stuff out, you know, sort of that thing, running your own race, not worrying about what everyone else is doing. Something you probably, I'm always growing as a person, as a father, as a CEO, you know, trying to become better. None of us are the finished article. But yeah, I was probably too worried about everything else. Not that you wasn't, but you know, sometimes you just say, well, you know, I'll take that bit of information and we'll carry on doing this. You know, I think sometimes in your early days as a founder, you're just so, God, we got to go, you know, and everything's such high stakes and everything's like, it can all fall over tomorrow. I think that's the thing that goes away over time when you talked about what's different earlier. The feeling that it can all just, like where you guys are with your business now, because you started at a similar time, that feeling, if you go back to 2017, that it just might not be a business tomorrow. You know, so that goes away over time, which then you have other things to think about. But yeah, there's definitely some mistakes there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And how do you create or find time to stand back from the noise, stand back from the day to day, give yourself thinking time to be innovative, strategic, to come up with ideas? Because certainly something I struggle with, that you're kind of in all the time running a million miles an hour and growing your business. And you almost have to manufacture that, don't you? I don't know if you've got any mechanisms that people could learn from.
I'm working on it.
Not one of your strengths.
But, no, not if the team look at my calendar. But then it's bad as well, because you might give a perception that you're busy, even though the guys know you've always got an open door and you can do that. And you know, it's definitely something for me. I think I think I've got it in my head that you spend a vast amount of time being operational, tactic, and strategic, and you just go up and down that pyramid. So one of my strengths is to look forward, but I don't get a lot of time to do it. I think we've probably got about 5 years worth of ideas. It's building them quick enough. But so I don't worry about that. I think operation is a business as we scale, because of the people being so important. I think I do need more time, but I think, you know, we've massively invested in the team this year, going from like, you know, it's going to be 30 to nearly 100 people. So one of my goals this year is to definitely give myself more time to think about that more tactically, about how we kind of scale and grow the team. But yeah, work in progress for me.
Yeah, good on you for being honest. Me too, by the way. I'm asking the question for a reason, because I can learn as well. I'm keen to understand like the personal journey bit for you a little bit, because perhaps I don't know where you are on this scale, but I found, as we've grown a team of people and taken a similar philosophy to you, brought people in who are better than me at certain things, you know, who can elevate the business and really take us to the next level. But you find yourself moving further and further away from decisions being made, or, you know, tactical things in the business, or people being hired without you being massively involved. And, you know, this gap starts to form, and there's ways to stay connected. But you transition, don't you? You have to realize that it's not all about you. You can't make every decision. You can't be involved in everything. You've got to trust people and give them the space to be autonomous and make decisions. There's a real mental journey for most people in there. I'm keen to understand, you know, are you on that journey? What have you experienced, and what you know, what's been your take from that part of running the business?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing it more and more now. I kind of get a kick out of seeing something happening without me. So you got it. I think I've got to embrace it. Like, you know, someone could deal with something, or there's something that happens, something progresses, like, and you see it, and then you're like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was happening. Or I didn't know we'd already fixed that, or that was sorted. And I think it does just come back to trusting the team and working with them. There's always something on fire, right? And that's your job. My old boss again used to describe it as being like chief interferer. Like, when is it your time to interfere? And but in saying that in a very helpful and kind way. You know, there's always a department or a team because things break and things need to scale. So there's always going to be somewhere that needs your help. But again, it's just balancing that time. So I think it's just being comfortable with, and again, something I'm working on, just letting go. Unfortunately, you know, you just can't do everything. Otherwise, you'll you know, run yourself into the ground trying to think about too much, or you know, or try and control the uncontrollables.
Yeah, it's very difficult, isn't it? And we start a business, and it's our baby. We care about it so much. You have to learn to care in a different way, don't you? And it's a real settings change. But some people can't do that, Tom. It's interesting. I've seen lots of people really struggle with that battle and that process. Just being able to.
I think it depends, right? Like, even my team now, like, again, I'm really honest. So we're looking at different roles in sales and recruiting like a sales leader. And I think there's this perception that Tom's going to struggle to let go of it because it's my domain experience. But, you know, far from it. I need someone who can, you know, run a really fantastic sales team. And, you know, believe it or not, I was a sales leader, but I wasn't the best. You know, I was good at sales, but I'd look back and say a lot of my behaviors are learned, and then I've learned from my mistakes, and I'm a better people manager and a better leader from that. But as a day-to-day sales manager, no, I'm not the best there ever was or ever is. So, you know, the team need more than that, you know.
And interestingly, it's far easier to let go when you bring somebody in who's good. If you're hiring the right way, if your hiring strategy is solid, you bring somebody in. I brought somebody in as a commercial director a couple of years or a year and a half ago. Very easy to let go because of the caliber of person I was able to find and the fit. And we're very vigilant in the recruitment process, probably got a bit lucky as well to some degree. Other times we've hired somebody and found it very hard to let go because you just got that gut feeling that it's not going to move in the way you need it to, and you don't know until they're in. So I think there's an interesting narrative around when to do it and when not. And I think instinctively as founders, we probably get a gut feeling that tells us it's right or wrong, and it's about measuring that internally and being honest with yourself. Can I just flip us back? Final question, because we're getting towards the end of time. Of First 12 months, about to found a business, just have founded a business. What are the key bits of advice that you give to somebody who's in that stage, probably running around like a headless chicken, doesn't have the senior team, can't afford to bring in the senior team they might want just yet, needs to prove revenue, still testing on the engineering side? You know, you said it's like juggling a box of frogs, isn't it? You got a lot going on. What advice would you give to people in that stage?
I think advice is always very hard because you can take it with a pinch of salt, and everyone's situation is different. But I think you've got to be very focused, you know, on one or two things, and not you know, differentiate your way. So, you know, can you make that product work? Can you make it stick? Can you sell it? Yeah, and do you make the customer happy? And that's all we obsessed around, you know, all the time. And if what's really, you know, whether you need to write it down or check yourself, like the fundamentals is, if you don't have a happy customer, then you haven't got a business. You know, so I think it's very easy to get distracted these days anyway. Like everything going on, all the noise. But depending on your business and depending what's most important, just stick to those things that are gonna, you know, really make it work. And you're just gonna have to, all those temptations that come up to go, oh, we could do this and make that better, and you know, all of that. It's just like, is that really what I should be doing with my time? Is that really gonna, you know, help us get to the next stage? So I think focus really, and just being disciplined with your time.
The biggest takeaway I'm sticking with me is you talking about this customer success, the investment in that, and the customer being happy. How much of a priority you've made that. I think that's a hugely overlooked to businesses who are running thin in the early stages, you know, and have to be fairly lean. You know, there's often a focus on product, top of funnel revenue, pipeline, and new business. And I think it's a really valid point. Is naturally there's no point investing in that when you haven't got any customers. But I think the earlier you do that, it feels like that's a really good, poignant piece of advice that we can take from your experience and from your learnings. And I think that's a universal thing that is absolutely digestible.
I think it's proven, and I've seen it even in stats, like depending in which order, like VP of success, VP of marketing should always come before VP of sales. Doesn't matter if you've got the domain experience or not, because those things need to, in an efficient modern business, need to grow more successfully, and we did it in that order. Not that I strategically sat down and thought about it, because I'm not very good at that, Owen, and don't have time, but it's maybe just instinctively knowing what was good about Royal Gateway and where we invested. And that, again, I think for anyone maybe sitting there and got half an idea about founding, like go and get the experience as well. Like, I don't think I would have been able to start the business or know what I'd know. And I still made a ton of mistakes and did a ton of stuff wrong. And I've been working sitting on a board for 5 years, 2 exits, whatever, and still made a ton of mistakes. So I do think that experience of going out there and doing it, like maybe 1 or 2 years, in a mid-level role, probably, not everyone is Mark Zuckerberg and just leaves uni and starts a business. I think you need some good business and life experience. Otherwise, it's very tough, I think, to know what to do in certain situations.
Yeah, totally agree. Just going back to your point before, I think it's interesting you say about, obviously you didn't strategically think about that order of hire and focus, but what you did think about is the values of the company and the fact that you wanted the customer to come first. And I think that's probably fed those experiences, and that's the purpose of these conversations, is other people can benefit from your hindsight. You've got the benefit of hindsight there. Actually, whether you did it on purpose or not doesn't matter. As we look back on it, you're now saying it's something well worth thinking about, and I think that's fantastic advice. Tom, just to wrap up, who should be talking to Jiminny? What kind of organisations and people can you help, and how can they get in touch with you or with Jiminny if they want to do that?
Yeah, anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. But if you want to go to the company, it's just www.jiminny with 2 N's, JIMINNY.com, and then you can just chat to the team. We respond pretty quick. But anyone who's got a kind of B2B sales team, sort of growing, scaling, even more of an established business, talking to customers, we'd be happy to have a conversation, see if we can help.
Good stuff. Well, look, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed hearing a bit more about your story and more importantly, the learnings that have come from that and some of the mistakes you've made and some of the things that you got right as well. Congratulations on the journey so far. I'll be watching enthusiastically from the sidelines as you grow beyond 100 people in the next 12 or by the end of the year. Thank you so much for joining us on air.
Pleasure, Owen. All right, see you soon.
Bye-bye.